Hello, I'm Craig DeRoche, CEO of Family Policy Alliance. We've recently celebrated several social conservative victories during the SoCon Conference in Indianapolis, but folks, the battle continues. In Wisconsin, for example, the Supreme Court recently advanced an expanded pathway to advance transgender ideology on minors of all people. The Supreme Court just recently did that. One concerning aspect of the case involves a rule that forces licensed counselors and therapists to only promote transgender ideology. They're salespeople for this slavery with minors struggling with gender dysphoria. Wisconsin Family Council is speaking out, saying, "Hey, people make all sorts of choices in their life. They don't need to be trapped in something." And they're seeking to argue that the state's highest court for overstepping their constitutional authority, literally becoming thought police in Wisconsin. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Degner, one of our most outstanding family policy council leaders, folks, and he is a dynamic leader. He's just taking over Wisconsin. That's a swing state to address the issue and other topics. Dan is injecting so many new things into this. He was the ambassador of the Church Ambassador Network, so he comes from the pews, from the grassroots. After 4 years on the team under our dear friend Julian Appling, who helped bring me into this job, he stepped into the role. He's the interim president. Now he's the full-on president, and he's growing this. In Wisconsin, they're demonstrating, folks, that they can beat the liberal intelligentsia time after time after time. Dan, it is such an honor to have you on the show today to talk about what you're facing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Craig, and we greatly appreciate our partners in your ministry at Family Policy Alliance.
Yeah, so you and I were together last week. We're kind of having fun with this because America's figuring this out now. We really we don't have the money of other people. We're very well endowed. We're about a $60 million a year movement, but we're talking about how we kind of social conservatives were the biggest deal in the election. We were the biggest deal in who got the good jobs. We were the biggest deal in the one big beautiful bill. We're the biggest deal in the rescissions, and it's really kind of a high time for social conservatives. Didn't feel like that last week, Dan?
Oh, yeah, well, and not just last week, but I want to go back to last November. In November 2024, Wisconsin was the state that put Trump over 270 electoral votes. We were the state that got him exactly at 270, and even for the electoral vote college, we were number 270 for that as well. And what was the number one issue that drove voters to the polls for Trump? It was saving women's sports. It was saying that no, biological men should not be playing in women's sports. And that drove out tons and tons of voters in a swing state like Wisconsin, where elections can be decided by 10, 20, 30,000 votes. That was the issue that got him over the line to get him to 270.
And I'm talking with, and I need to refresh our audience on this too. I was talking about Wisconsin over the weekend with some very high profile former DOJ leaders, and they were even unaware of what you guys faced. So you guys pick up the civil rights movement where it leaves off. Rosa Parks gets kicked off a bus. America comes together and says, you don't do that anymore. Men, don't get to do that. We don't do it on race. 50 years goes by. A white dude kicks Riley Gaines off the podium. She didn't just get there first. She did 10,000 hours to beat everybody to get on the stage. America forgets the lesson. You guys in Wisconsin are teaching that lesson again. The evil one sends some what they call advocates out, and they firebomb your office on Mother's Day. What year was that, Dan?
Yeah, so 2022. So I just want to kind of put this listening back into the framework for what had happened. So it was just a couple days earlier, we got this amazing news that there was a leak on the Dobbs decision that said that Roe versus Wade was going to be no more, that we were going to be able to, in our states, decide the issue of abortion that went via court in Washington deciding. And we were the first group in America that was attacked. And so Mother's Day morning, we got a phone call that there had been a Molotov cocktail thrown into my office area. And even though, yes, that was 3 years ago, Craig, I swear every day when I walk into my office, it still is a reminder for me. I go straight to my office window and I open up the curtains and the blinds where that office attack had happened. And I still see to this day the glass that's sitting there. I'm reminded of really what we are fighting for, social conservatives, what we are fighting for as pro-lifers, that there really is, our lives are at stake when we're doing this work, but it's so essential because we're trying to advance God's mission in the public square.
And folks, we can't even tell you all of the grief that the Dan Degners of the world deal with. His peer in New York State right now is incarcerated by Letitia James for not having receipts on $1,200 of expenses in 2019. I'm going to get back to you on that one, but we're talking in Wisconsin right now because Wisconsin matters. Wisconsin decided the November election because the Trump campaign, you just said it, leaned heavily into our issues. They told the truth the way it's never been told for at least 50 years in America, and they won huge. They defied logic, they defied polls, and they won Wisconsin. Then February comes around, and you have a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. There's some fatigue now, and there's some credit taking that's going on. People have said, "Oh, we did that on TV. We won the election. I'll just write a check for it. We don't need parties anymore. We don't need churches. We don't need relationships with people at the doors." And I think it was Elon and some other people wrote a check for like $25 million and said, we can just buy seats now. Dan, how did that work out for them?
Well, it didn't work out. And what we've seen, especially in a state like Wisconsin, is we are going to oppose just big money being put in just for the sake of big money or those sort of things. You need to have grassroots relationships. And they came out last week that the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race, April election, off year, we spent $115 million on a state Supreme Court race. The previous record was $50 million. And that was a record that had surpassed the previous one that was $30 million. And so we see in Wisconsin, especially, that these races are getting so expensive that it's because Wisconsin is such an important state. And what we saw as well is we thought if 60% of the conservatives that voted for Trump would vote for the conservative candidate, that we would win. We had 62%. But the downside was that 78% of Kamala Harris voters voted for the liberal candidate who previously defended Planned Parenthood in court. And so what we're seeing more and more is that we need to find ways that we get every single grassroots, conservative, MAGA, whatever voter out, and making sure that we continue to engage them in April, November, beyond. And the typical strategies of let's throw money at a race in October of an even year, that game is long gone. We need to mobilize and equip people through the entirety of the year, all year, every year, and making sure that we do get them out to the polls in November, of course, but we need to engage them starting now for November of 2026.
You had a pretty good budget for November of 24, right? I remember you guys did a lot of good work.
Yeah, so for the April election, we did have a really extensive voter project. So what we did in Wisconsin specifically, well, we did a lot of different things, but one of the things we did is we targeted a lot of our Christian conservative base, especially our homeschool families. Now, the liberal candidate who unfortunately did win, her husband authored a book about the dangers of homeschooling and the dangers of Christian conservatives that advance a pro school choice movement and a pro homeschooling movement. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that was aware for Christians around the state. So we targeted around 280,000 Christian conservatives who they voted in November, they voted for Donald Trump, but they need that little bit of an extra push and a tug and a pull to make sure we get them out in those April elections and those midterm elections. And so we're still waiting on the data for that, but we really did see amazing increases in voter participation and turnout from that. And that's just one of the things we did.
You got people to vote, but how much? It's okay that you didn't get money in April. We lost that election because the investors, the donors invested in Wisconsin Family in November to turn out our voters we won. And when they said, we're going to do it on TV in April with $115 million, we're not going to give you the sufficient budget to do what you did with 280,000. You could have done bigger, but they said pass, hard pass. That's what I'm trying to get across here is we want the donors that are hearing this podcast to know it's okay to say that to us, but we are literally the difference between whether you win or lose in states like Iowa or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or Michigan. And it's all in the metrics. I'm not saying grandiose things right now. And I just wanted people to be able to hear that. We really want to make a difference in Wisconsin, but we have to do that in every election, not just once every 4 years at a presidential election.
Yeah. Well, and going off of that, Craig, too, one of the models we've seen out there is the stereotypical church engagement model of let's spend $200,000, $300,000 to try to get churches engaged. But then when we look at the metrics of it, we're not engaging. I'm not saying us, but the broader other sort of old fashioned models engaging maybe 100 churches at most in a state. And what we've seen with our model is that for $200,000 or $300,000, we can build long term, day to day relationships with pastors around our state by bringing them to the capital for ministries, which makes them more likely to engage in an election once they have that relationship. And during the April election, we personally called each and every evangelical church in the state of Wisconsin to engage those resources. Barna says that 10% of churches will use any election resources in given time. We had 42% of our churches in Wisconsin were using our election resources. And that's because of those personal touches and personal relationships that we could do at a much lower cost than what a lot of other groups are out there doing.
And that's what I'm trying to say to people is, look, and you're saying that's great, it's 42%. And what the left says is, hey, wait a second, those people vote 89% our way. Let's legally get them out there to vote, because if 75 or 80% of them, we would have won that Supreme Court race. And that's actually what we do. And it doesn't hardly cost us any money compared to $15 million of TV ads. We can actually get the votes out there. Dan Degner is one of the best leaders we have on that. And he stands on the shoulders of Julaine Appling and others that it really defied gravity in Wisconsin. I say that. It's hard for me to say that as a former Speaker of the House in Michigan. I wish our performance was better in Michigan. But to be honest with you, Wisconsin has done a better job. And folks, it's because they do not inject the LGBTQ into their Republicanism as much as the GOP in Michigan has and is currently struggling with as well. In Wisconsin, the social conservatives run the party, and it's been a joy to work with you. There's a lot of issues that you worked on, conservative victories nationwide, but you're facing some. Tell us about this. Tell us about this case, the trans ideology on minors.
Yeah. So Governor Evers versus Howard Marklein. Howard Marklein is the head of our Joint Finance Committee. So basically, what has happened throughout Wisconsin's entire history is that if the governor, the executive branch, is going to make a new rule or new law through executive power, well, they need to go through a legislative check and balance. So that's happened all throughout history. So our governor said, well, if a Christian counselor, or maybe not even a Christian, but if a licensed counselor or therapist says, I am not okay advancing a transgender ideology on minors, they said, well, we're going to take away your license and suspend your license if you do that. And so the legislature has come back and forth every single session. The governor's done this and said, no, you are overstepping your bounds. That is going to be checked by the legislature. And the legislature has killed that through the Rules Committee. What our state Supreme Court did is they overturned the 70-year precedent that we've had. And they made it so that the governor has absolute authority to do whatever he wanted. And unfortunately, what they're doing is they're trying to trick voters. And you've seen this as the speaker, oftentimes liberals will do this, is what they would say is, oh, well, conversion therapy is trying to use shock and all these other really horrendous things towards the homosexual community. And that's not at all what this is dealing with. This is dealing with licensed counselors and therapists who are trying to help families and children that are saying, I'm struggling with gender dysphoria and I want help because I know that I'm really born a male, I'm really born a female, and I need help dealing with these issues. And what the governor has said is, well, we're just going to make it so that you can't have those conversations in the first place. And what's scary is our court has affirmed this, but it's not just this issue that's scary to us and groups around our state. Is what the Supreme Court in Wisconsin has said is that the executive branch can make any rule, they can make any policy, they can infringe on any of your rights, and you have no recourse with the legislature to stop this. So as conservatives, as even just general people, we want to be able to go to our state representative, our state senator, and say, here's a problem, I want to fix it. And our liberal court has taken that out of our hands and it said, nope, it is Kane Evers is one that decides what we can or cannot do.
And you got some real not so Democrats there. And they're the kind of people, too, that have been saying that the Republican Party is a threat to democracy. But folks, all that a democracy is justice in its orderly way in which we dispense justice through a constitution and statute. And so when you start disregarding the constitution and statute, you are the knucklehead that destroyed the democracy. And particularly when we're talking about the value, dignity, and worth of a human life, that's all we're talking about here, right? Think that justice in Wisconsin, I did criminal justice reform with a lot of your great governors. And you say the value, dignity, and worth of a human being is something. Your Supreme Court continues to disregard that. Folks, this trans ideology, this is scarier than you think. What it's saying is forget about trans. What it's saying is the government can teach a worldview to your kids in objection to you as parents or other medical professionals or other scientists from other states or things like the U.S. government. And they're going to box people out, and your governor and your attorney general and your Supreme Court is more interested in keeping people involved in that lifestyle that has been rejected by nearly 90% of the people that choose that lifestyle. And they're becoming recruiters for that. That's what the Wisconsin government is. They're asking your governor to use taxpayer money to keep people on their treadmill of chronic disease for the rest of their life. And this is the issue that we're asking you to pay attention to while we organize in Wisconsin. Am I getting this right, Dan?
Yeah, well, and And this isn't necessarily our issues of marriage, family life, religious liberty, but this is why these spring elections are so important to be funded. Is what we've seen is this court has basically gotten rid of a lot of our voting rights laws, like making sure that you can't have ballot drop boxes and making sure that we have election integrity laws. And this court has just said, well, we're just going to throw away precedent. We're just going to throw away anything in order to make the most liberal possible voting election laws to really allow for cheating and those sort of things. And so these elections are important because yes, they impact the state, but they impact the federal government when it comes to our voting for Congress, voting for the U.S. Senate, and all those other areas that play a really big role in what happens in Washington, D.C.
So, folks, Family Policy Alliance is a collection of 40 state groups right now, roughly, and we're trying to get the next 10 states together. We have over 400 full-time employees, over $60 million of infrastructure. And as I said, we're kind of really having a season right now of changing public policy that in a way that we believe honors the Lord. And as he taught us, you'll know it by its fruit. The fruit in America is not being produced in the way that the liberals have said it would with these tragic policies that they've tried out. This is our time to push back. We're so grateful that you support Family Policy Alliance and our family policy councils. Folks, if you're in Wisconsin or you know or love people in Wisconsin, we can't win this fight nationally unless you're supporting the Wisconsin family, right? And the way that our movement works is different than everybody else. Everybody else forms a national group and they come up with their ideas in DC and they bring them at you. We come up with our ideas where you live and they come at us that way, like welfare reform did in the 90s, from your kitchen table toward DC, not the other way around, but we need you to participate. The reason why we're doing this show right now is Iowa, North Carolina, and Ohio. Let's just take on those today, Dan. All those were Obama states for 8 years. State legislature, state governor, they're ruby red right now. It was because social conservatism. Right, Dan? We know that.
Yep.
And we're inviting you. We think that Wisconsin, the FPA, and our national partners think that Wisconsin is how we make America great again, how we turn things around. And we need you to stop what you're doing and get involved with Wisconsin Family today. So, Dan, tell them how to do that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. And so we have two organizations in Wisconsin. We have Wisconsin Family Council as our 501c3, Wisconsin Family Action as our 501c4. But you can go to either of our websites. For the C3, it's wifamilycouncil.org, and our C4 is wifamilyaction.org. And so either of those is a great way to find out more about us, as well as how to support each of those ministries.
Folks, if you're at home and you're hearing these things and you are thinking back, did I hear him right? One of the presidents is incarcerated, Letitia James, in jail for 72 hours for not turning over their donors. Yes, we're in a civil rights battle, and it's becoming a pitched battle because we are winning. The Republican Party and the mainstream media told us that same-sex marriage was supported by 55% of Republicans. 55% of Republicans, a clear majority. They've been saying that for a decade. And then they did the exit poll in November of 24, and they found that 41% of the people that voted Republican that day nationally supported same-sex marriage. And the Republican Party went from a small regional thing that fought for electoral college wins to a majority again. So, Dan, we become a majority again when the Republican Party starts embracing social conservatism unabashedly, like your senator. I believe that's the answer. Do you believe the candidates in Wisconsin are modeling that? Do you have some senators like, some people coming up like your senator that know how to do this the right way?
Yeah, well, and even earlier today, I was at an event where I was talking to one of our gubernatorial candidates and just highlighting the importance of there is so many great winning issues right now on social conservative issues. We have age verification. We believe that children should not be exposed to pornography. This is an 80-20 issue. We should be promoting this every opportunity we can. Save women's sports, another 80-20 issue. We should be promoting that wherever we can, making sure kids can't get transgender hormone therapies. We should be doing it wherever we can. In Wisconsin, we're having a constitutional amendment. Prayerfully, we need to get it passed again in our legislature. But likely this November, 2026, we'll have a constitutional amendment to ensure that churches can never be shut down from by the government again. That is a winning issue where we see that 70 to 30% of people in our polling, they support that issue overwhelmingly. Independents support it. And if conservatives want to win in 2026 and beyond, they need to find these social conservative issues that are 80-20 issues that we're promoting and giving them and really take them and run with them and make sure that we can continue to win elections, continue to build a grassroots network that will support them in November, but also throughout the year.
Well, folks, everything that Dan's talking about is where we want you to be. It's fun. It's enjoyable. You get to serve the Lord. We don't guarantee outcomes. We do things for the right reasons, and we let God sort it out. But we have a good time, and we've helped millions, not thousands, but millions of families with the policy changes that we have enacted together. Not when I say we, that includes you. Everybody listening to this show. I'm not claiming any credit for that. The body of Christ and this movement. And it's a privilege to serve here with you, Dan, and to have you on here as we do the call to action for people to really dial in and start paying attention to the battlegrounds. And I'm glad we were able to talk to you about what's going on in Wisconsin. Folks, this is ground zero, and we need your support today.
Thanks for having me on.